Hey there and welcome back to Rimworld. My name is Pete and today we complete another episode of our Rimworld Ice Sheet Survival series. Last time we left off after successfully defeating a poison ship and hunting down a Thrumbo, and today we start things off with Cambiar at the research bench and Cobra at the stove. Cambiar is still researching deep drilling, not because we necessarily want to build a deep drill, but because we need the project to be completed before we can research and build our spaceship. As Cambiar heads off to bed, Cobra has also finished making pemmican for the huskies, and that should now keep them fed for the next few days. That means it is now once again time for upgrades around the base, and just like in the last episode you had some fantastic ideas in the comment section, the first one of which a quick and easy defensive upgrade, we are now adding 2 more deadfall traps in front of the sandbags, which should make the way into our base a bit more difficult. It doesn't take long until the 2 traps are constructed, and with that our base is now a tiny bit more secure, and we can focus our attention over to Cobra's bedroom. 2 quick and easy upgrades for that bedroom are a dresser and an end table, which both increase the comfort level of Cobra's bed. No matter how well or poorly they are constructed, both pieces of furniture will add a flat 5% to the comfort level, they both also add a bit of beauty, and with that they are definitely useful upgrades for the somewhat dull looking bedroom. Cambiar in the meantime has gotten some rest and is researching again, while our rice farm is also once again ready to be harvested, and as our designated farmer, Cobra will get right on that. He doesn't quite finish resowing though before his night owl trait forces him to go to bed, but at least at the moment food is not that big of an issue, so I think we can live with that. We can also see here, thanks to the newly constructed dresser and end table, Cobra's comfort level while sleeping is now at 72%, bumping him up from comfortable to very comfortable, and increasing his mood by a tiny amount. We now switch over to Cambiar, who starts working on the next project. This was something I already talked about in the last episode, and it was also once again mentioned in the comments. We are now going to split up our corpse storage room. The reason behind that is fairly simple. Cambiar is a cannibal, and as such he doesn't have a problem observing human corpses. Cobra, on the other hand, is neither a cannibal nor a psychopath, and will therefore be hit with mood penalties if he sees dead human bodies. However, Cobra is also our cook, and that means at the same time he's also our butcher, so from time to time he will have to make trips into the corpse storage room, and I think it's a good idea to keep the human corpses out of the way for those. We will still keep them around though. I think sooner or later Cambiar will also want to prepare himself a few cannibal meals, but still, for Cobra we don't need to make life harder than it already is. Around midnight then, the barrier in between the 2 rooms is finished. A bit of hauling still needs to be done, but that is a job for the next day. Cobra meanwhile has replanted all of the rice, and with what he harvested earlier he can now cook some meals. We still have a few in reserve, but it's a quick process, and once again I think especially in a scenario like this you can never have enough food. Once the meals are done, we will also continue right away with a fresh order of pemmican. We want to make use of the fact that we have a lot of rice lying around at the moment, and our meat reserves are also definitely sizable right now. At this point I would also like to know from you guys, at which point do you think we should switch over to fine meals? Fine meals use the same amount of ingredients as pemmican, so 5 units of meat and 5 units of plant matter. They have the same nutritional value as simple meals, but they also provide a +5 mood bonus. So eventually I think making that switch is a good idea, however it would of course also increase our dependency on both vegetables and meat at the same time. Right now the simple meals provide us with a bit more flexibility in that regard, so let me know in the comments what you think. Should we make the switch, or is this something we could do beforehand to make our food supply a bit more stable? As Cobra now heads off to bed, we have the first event of the episode, and it is, as so often before, a crashed survivor. This one right here, a fantastic candidate as a fighter and doctor, yes, incapable of intellectual work and arts, but at this point that wouldn't be that big of a problem. The psychopath trait is actually also very useful, as it prevents mood penalties from slaughtering humans, however, abrasive is very likely to cause problems. Additionally, a permanent wound on the right hand is not ideal either, and so I sadly think we will have to wait a bit longer until we add our 3rd colonist. Meanwhile, back in the base, Cambiar can now reorganize our corpses. Human corpses go to the top and everything else goes to the bottom. This also includes mechanoid corpses, with which Cobra does not have a problem. Once everyone is hauled into their place, we now continue our base beautification project by removing all of the mountain walls around our workshop area. For a fast miner like Cambiar, that doesn't take long, at least for those pieces he can reach, and so Cobra now gets the job of replacing everything with walls made out of stone. Cambiar also helps out a bit with the construction process. Eventually we are running out of stones a bit, so we have to mix and match, but apart from small differences in their durability, there are no noteworthy differences between the different types of stone. Next event, and this time it's cargo pods. Inside we find 146 units of camel hair, which is actually one of the warmest clothing materials in the game, and will therefore definitely be hauled back, but for that we'll have to wait a bit, at least until the huskies wake up in a few hours. In the early morning hours then, all wall pieces are replaced. Once again, there are a few behind the research bench that we cannot reach at the moment, but our base layout will of course not remain the same forever, so at this point we don't need to go overboard just to replace those few pieces. Instead, Cambiar now returns to the research bench, and since we just spent a decent amount of stone, Cobra is making new ones. Our huskies meanwhile can be seen hauling back the camel hair, and I have to admit it's moments like these where I'm very happy that we kept them around. Way past his early morning bedtime, Cobra then heads off to sleep, while for the remainder of the afternoon Cambiar is busy with research. In the evening hours then, Cambiar heads off to bed and our research project is nearing its completion, and Cobra, well, he takes a bit of time cleaning up the base. I know that it's not terribly necessary to clean up all the bloodstains near our traps, but there is also quite a bit of a mess in the area next to our turrets, and that is causing some slight mood penalties for everyone who's walking through. Speaking of mood penalties, with the base largely cleaned up, Cobra is now heading out to haul back the corpse of the dead crash-landed survivor. Surprisingly though, as you can see, he does not get a mood penalty for that, which I had actually expected. Briefly heading into our corpse storage room and dropping off the body doesn't cause any penalties either, and so at this point I was a bit confused about how the whole observed corpse thing works. If you have any insight, then please feel free to share. My guess right now would be that it has something to do with the fact that it's night, and so since we don't have any lights installed, Cobra can't see as well. However, I might also be completely mistaken, so once again, if you know more, then please let me know down below. In the morning then, our usual shift change, Cobra heads off to bed while Cambiar once again sits down in front of the research bench. Not for long though, because just a few hours later the research project is completed. And with that we have now unlocked deep drilling. Still, another big project is blocking our way to the ship sensor cluster, and at the bottom of the tree here you can also see cryptosleep caskets are also a thing that we still need to work on before we then finally have access to all 5 shipbuilding projects. For the moment though, we'll leave research be for a while. There are still quite a few other things that I want to take care of in this episode. And one of them is of course another harvest, as our rice has once again fully grown. While Cobra starts cutting away, Cambiar now makes even more stones for us, because Cobra didn't spend all that long at the stonecutter's table, and so even at this point our reserves are still somewhat lackluster. Soon after Cambiar heads off to bed, Cobra has finished harvesting and resowing everything, and that means with fresh rice in our storage room it is time to fire up the stove again. A few days have passed since the last batch of simple meals was made, and to be honest the rice is piling up in our storage area, although don't get me wrong, I'm definitely not complaining. Once again, as the simple meals are now finished, Cobra also cooks up some pemmican. The reserves for the huskies are also a bit low. Cambiar meanwhile is also awake again, and he is currently working on something that I have been talking about for a while now. We have now spent a few summers in our mountain base out here on the ice sheet, and so far we have been pretty lucky regarding infestations. Still, we shouldn't test our luck too much, and since we are already midway through spring and summer is getting closer, we are now installing a few coolers around the base. The idea behind that is to use those coolers in the summertime to cool the base down to below -17 degrees Celsius. That is the temperature below which infestations no longer spawn, and only during summer does our base actually heat up above that. So the risky period is definitely limited. Still, at some point we should start to play it safe. We now set the target temperature for the cooler to -30 degrees and will also shut it off for the time being. I think we'll have to experiment a bit to see how many coolers we'll actually need to cool the base down sufficiently. I just wanted to start the process somewhere. Regarding temperatures, we can now also safely shut off the heater in the husky stables. It is once again warm enough so they don't freeze anymore, and while we're at it we can actually also clear the path to install the next cooler. Especially inside of the husky stables, an infestation would be terrible, as it could almost immediately kill all 3 animals on which we spent so much time training. One more thing about the coolers, you can see it here. Their output is not only cold air on the blue side, but they also create hot air on the red side. Since we want to use the coolers to prevent infestations, that hot air definitely needs to be pumped outside of the base, otherwise the cooler would cool down one room while heating up another. As you can imagine, this also makes using coolers inside of a mountain base a bit of a tricky thing, as most of the time the situation is similar to ours, where the base actually only has one side that connects to the outside. Once again, if you have any cool ideas or tricks on how to solve that, then please let me know down below. For the time being, we have reduced the risk a bit, but it is definitely not entirely eliminated. At this point, we have also somewhat decimated our steel reserves, so it's a good thing we still have a few mechanoid corpses stored away, which we can now disassemble for steel, plasteel and components. 5 corpses later then, the situation is looking much better. Cobra is also awake again and preparing more pemmican, while outside of the base the geothermal generator, and with that our main energy source, has just broken down, so Cambiar immediately rushes over to fix the problem. For Cobra, the rest of the night is then spent cooking, until in the early morning hours Cambiar wakes up and starts mining again. Cobra is already making a few more stone chunks, while Cambiar carves out the wall surrounding his bedroom. With the wall removed, we can now also install a vent, which will equalize the temperatures between the husky stables and Cambiar's bedroom. Ideally, that lets us use the cooler to cool down both rooms simultaneously, although once again we'll have to see whether or not one cooler is powerful enough for that. The new walls as well as the vent itself are quickly built, and around midday Cambiar's bedroom has been significantly improved. Shortly after then, an eclipse hits the ice sheet, and with that our 5 solar panels now stop producing power. Still, at least for the moment, it seems like our base is unaffected. With Cobra in bed, we now also make a bit of a risky move, as we will now have Cambiar slaughter a few of the human corpses. Cobra will definitely not approve of that, I just hope his mood penalty will not be too severe. And here we are, the first corpse is slaughtered and the penalty is only a -6, however one that lasts for a full 6 days. Cobra's opinion of Cambiar also drops down by 10 points, thankfully though the penalties do not increase any further even after Cambiar has slaughtered the second corpse. This means we can now also more or less safely go for number 3, and also reassures me that from time to time we can get rid of our corpses this way, at least as Cobra does not have any significant other mood penalties. We now have 3 corpses butchered and quite a bit of equipment salvaged, including a power armor that definitely looks intriguing. However, since neither one of our colonists are frontline fighters at the moment, we are not equipping it just yet, but we'll definitely keep it in mind for any future combat scenarios. With Cambiar in bed and a bit of hauling taken care of, it is now time for another small improvement, as we still have a few unsmooth tiles near Cambiar's bedroom. After a few seconds of work though, the stone floor is smooth, and the beauty of the area increases further. Speaking of beauty, I think it's time we go down that road a bit further, and we'll do so by constructing a sculptor's table. The sculptor's table is a workbench that is used to make art, and its current location here, of course, is only temporary. Still, Cobra is actually a fairly skilled artist, and our base, well, it's honestly not the most beautiful. So while Cobra is ready to start sculpting, Cambiar also gets back into the research game, and the next project will indeed be cryptosleep caskets. What those are and how they're used, we'll likely get to that at a later point in the playthrough. For now, the project is simply chosen because it stands in the way between us and the spaceship. The sculpting table is now also constructed, but of course we still need a place to sit. And since making art is a lengthy process, we now opt for the most comfortable option possible, which is the armchair. With a material requirement of 100 cloth or leather, it definitely comes at a price, but thankfully we have plenty of buffalo leather stored away, and the result is more than worth it, with a normal quality armchair having a comfort level of 0.8 and also a tiny beauty bonus. And indeed, the final product is of normal quality, so in his comfortable new armchair, Cobra can now prepare to start sculpting. One more thing before we can begin though, we still need some material. Sculptures can be made out of a variety of materials. Gold and silver definitely produce the most beautiful sculptures, but we don't have any of those to waste, so marble will have to do instead. Out of all the stones available in the game, marble is the most beautiful, which is also why back in episode 1 we chose a map with marble available. Now that comes in handy as Cambiar helps out a bit and chops the marble into pieces. We are aiming for a small sculpture to start us off, and that requires 70 marble to be made. In the evening then, the marble is ready and waiting for Cobra in the storage room. Cobra himself, however, first takes care of the harvest. Once the rice is also safely stored away, however, it is also time to start sculpting. Like I said, a small sculpture will do in the beginning. It will still take quite a bit of work to finish it. And since nothing exciting happens for the next few hours, we now skip ahead to the early morning of the next day, during which Cobra finally finishes the sculpture. Having a look at it, it is unfortunately only of poor quality. Still, the beauty rating is 34, which makes this by far the most beautiful item we have in our base at the moment. The sculpture's new home will then be our dining and research room. At the moment you can see with a beauty rating of -0.11 it is considered to be ugly. However, once we install the sculpture, the rating jumps up to 0.86, which is at least neutral. And I think over the course of the next few episodes we will make a few more sculptures, which should then hopefully remove the ugly environment debuff throughout our entire base. Up next we now have Ruby, who has just given birth. Only a single new husky joins the colony, and also once again only for a very limited amount of time. Now the episode is slowly coming to an end here, but I agree it has not been the most eventful one. However, thankfully we still have that ancient danger to play with, and so as our final small task in this episode we will now send Cambiar out to discover and hopefully survive what lies behind the walls. On the way I also discovered that a polar bear is roaming around the ice sheet, and since it is already on the move to attack us, let's take matters into our own hands and attack first. The first volleys here already land a few crucial hits. The polar bear is already slowed down significantly, and so it only takes a few more shots until the animal goes down. Instead of hauling it back to the base though, let's move on to the ancient danger. I definitely want to see what's behind those walls. Alright, here we are, a bit of a relief, no mechanoids or bugs, but instead 4 cryptosleep caskets. Of course, at this point we don't know who's inside yet, and that is also a mystery that will keep alive until the next episode. Next to the caskets we can also see a psychic sooth pulsar and some luciferium, and for today we'll only mark those to be hauled back by the huskies. Cambiar himself meanwhile takes care of the polar bear since that is too heavy for the animals, and with everyone hauling things back into the base we'll end this episode on a bit of a cliffhanger. Next time we'll then find out who's inside of the caskets, and who knows, maybe we even find someone we can use. For today we'll make the cut right here. As always, if you enjoyed the episode then I would be happy if you could leave a thumbs up, and of course if you want to support the channel further then feel free to either subscribe if you haven't already, or you can also support the Pete Complete Patreon. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.